Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and professional growth and opportunity across America. Welcome to another episode of the Ameritocracy. This week on Sidebar, I've got a great guest here, and executive coach Ann Collier. Ann, how are you doing?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Hey, last week, we're in Washington, D.C. this week. Last week, I had given you a call. I was thinking about a couple things from an executive coaching perspective, and you're in the middle of your leadership academy. How's that going?
Oh, it's going great. You know, we've had over 700 people go through the academy in the last 4 years. So that's an exciting statistic. We're on our 13th core training. And what's so rewarding for me is to see people have all these aha moments about themselves, about their colleagues, about the people they manage, about their family. Lots of smiles, lots of laughing, lots of sharing, lots of learning that will really help them be better, leaders, managers, and team members.
Yeah, I watch you online socially and see a lot of activity there. So I thought, that'd be great to kind of get an update of where you're at right now.
Yeah. We just finished, we used the Curtin Adaption Innovation Inventory, which measures problem-solving style on a roughly 140-point scale of more structured to less structured. So we just finished those 2 sessions last week. And tomorrow, I'm very excited to start the Actualized Leader profile work. The Actualized Leader framework was created by Dr. William Sparks. And if anybody's interested in taking a free short form version, just go to alpfree/Arudia or atpfree/Arudia if you want to see how your leadership style when you're in a good place and when you're stressed affects the culture around you. So as you know, I'm very focused and really, I love helping leaders and managers be better leaders so that they're actually creating a better culture. Because as you know, everybody's worried about performance, well-being, and retention. And if you have a great culture, then you have those things as well.
Yeah. And you and I call you up a lot on a lot of different topics. And one of the topics that I was wanting to talk to you a little bit, and I thought we'd bring it on the sidebar this week, is learning and credentialing. And, as the show is out there called Ameritocracy, focusing on meritocracy too, looking at credentialing at each step. And I think a lot of people, a lot of questions on, I'm at different levels, how much credentialing do I need? And what we're starting to see is a little bit of a phenomena with the way learning and credentialing is happening. It used to be all traditional. You get your big credentials, maybe go to college, check off the college degrees. But now what we're seeing is a lot of people, online getting different types of credentials. And for me, I'll just put it out there. You see, even online, I play guitar. You can go Guitar Tab, and out there they have a whole academy on how to advance yourself through that process. If you're into different types of things, it's almost like a college level course on something very interesting. And again, it could help you in your job, but it was probably more on the personal side. And then, just recently, what got me thinking about this is Lex Friedman has been starting to do a lot of long-form evaluations on different hardcore topics, communism. He looks at the history of it, and so to be able to draw you up to current day to give a perspective. If you get 2 or 3 hours on podcasts, I usually have about a half hour, 40 minutes on my runs in the morning, but it's just very helpful to be able to kind of unplug and maybe shift over. But I'm also noticing the use of this process in corporate America. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about from maybe your role as an executive coach and this possibly is a situation or a topic that gets brought up as executives are always trying to figure out how to do better. A lot of times, I know for me, coming to you was really trying to look at how to handle certain situations and how to be a good leader and to be thoughtful and also recognize my weaknesses and how do you react when you're under stress. But what I wanted to do a little bit today is talk through maybe from the executive view versus the staff and this learning and credentials. And I was just kind of curious, first of all, as a topic, is that one that you're seeing starting to be more prevalent lately?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people getting micro-credentials. It's often at the more senior levels, it's usually someone who, hey, I want to be the next CEO, or, you know, I want to be promoted, but geez, I don't have a finance background. Or I need to understand accounting a little bit better. That's actually often something, for example, that lawyers might need to be able to really understand their clients' balance sheets, that sort of thing. But they don't want to go back to business school. You know, law school was hard enough, and they have a pretty busy plate right now. So I definitely do. In fact, I've coached a few CEOs who were kind of ideal, except for needing more of a financial background, and then they look for the micro-credentialing. So it's about the credential, but it's also really and proving to the board that they've got the chops for this. But it's also about gaining the knowledge. Yeah. And that's been important.
Before I came to IBM, and I would help a lot of Fortune 500 companies before I came to Federal, I would get involved. I think you and I got involved with some executives that were pretty high up there together, and we kind of crossed over. A lot of times the executive coach process for the high level folks was a little bit done in the background. Like it was like you weren't sure whether the company was asking you to do that because they see some problems and don't want you to have problems, or they actually see raw material and unbelievable capability and they want to foster it. And but it was always something that the exec really didn't really talk about. You really didn't know. And I think where the micro-credentialing is, and it feels like another niche, which is, and I wanted to give you an example, maybe from my perspective of how I've used it, and maybe get a little bit of a reaction. Within IBM, obviously, we're a tech company. And I run supply chain business for consulting. So, we go through and do a lot of different stuff across all of Federal. So one of the things that they really tried to do is IBM is always evolving to a couple of years ago it was, hybrid cloud, move into the cloud, and there was, absolutely still AI, and then quantum is coming. And so, as a consultant, you've also got to be familiar as an executive of how do you position yourself in the market, because it's not just about you. And so there was 2 badges that I had gotten micro-credentialed, and one was basically a badge around Gen AI and the ability to be able to kind of have an IBM type credential as an executive. And what the thought there was that credential would be able to be viewed as something that, one, I could lead a discussion around AI at the executive level. The second was I'd have knowledge. I'm not the tech guy. I never, but IBM kind of has 3 different components: research, technology, like the products, software, hardware, et cetera, and then consulting. And on the consulting side, we're agnostic. But at a minimum, we should at least know the potential opportunity that we could do as a holistic company. So that badge kind of allowed me to have that credential and be able to kind of go out there. The second was the industry badge. And, here in the federal government, when you're going through, IBM kind of breaks that badge up into different sectors or industries. And so this is the government industry for IBM. It has industrial products, it has high-tech healthcare, et cetera. But they have a badging process, and at the very highest level of the sector, it's called the diamond. And if you're a diamond within the organization, and IBM not only promotes it out into the public as a thing, but they also internally make a pretty big deal about giving you a kind of a motivation. I don't mean just financially, just to really to help the people once they get it to use it. And one of the stats is about 300,000 people at IBM. Usually, like within all of the U.S. or globally, it's less than probably 300 or 400 people that have that, and so it's less than 1%. And then within federal, probably 15 to 20 people of about 2,500 people. So statistically, kind of a rare thing, but then our job is to internally get more people to get their badge. And so I can see the advantage of that. But I guess I'm bringing this up to you is like that, those are two examples of how a tech company could use it. And I was just wondering, when you're working with a lot of the different people in different industries, I know you do a lot of work in the legal area for, and lawyers and the heads of law firms. Any examples that you see where the micro-credentialing actually is something that's used very similar to kind of help drive business too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, privacy is huge. So again, just like what you said about AI, which, wasn't really around 10 years ago, or at least not the way that it is today, privacy has become such an issue. So whether you're a lawyer or not, there are so many data and privacy experts that are needed. And again, from the legal side, but also we do a lot of work in healthcare and in community with behavioral health organizations. So they, they've got HIPAA, they have all sorts of privacy rules. And most people, I would say, most of my clients aren't trained as technologists, kind of like what you said, but they need to understand it. They need to know the legal implications. So they need it for the knowledge, but then it's also a great credential for demonstrating to a client that that they can handle the work, that they're the best person for the job. And that's what you're talking about. It gives you credibility, certainly.
You and I, when we were kind of getting ready for this, we were also talking about a couple different articles out there. In one of the articles, I think that resonated with both of us was the Wall Street Journal article, February 23. And it kind of talked about, does the college degree doesn't matter anymore. But, a couple interesting things, and I'll just give you my takeaway on that article, which was, and again, I'm going to separate who we're talking to. We were saying we're talking about executives, but this is taking on like undergraduate degrees and degrees in general and the motivations. And, so the micro-credentialing starts to be put up as a potential alternative to the traditional college. And one of the facts that they used in there was 120 credits to get a college degree. And of the 120, 40 credits, which would be a full year of a 4-year degree, is electives. So, some of it, we all know people that potentially got a college degree in beer drinking or whatever.
They majored in beer drinking.
Exactly. It's like, and you see that, but I also know people that got a degree in physics and are rocket scientists today. And so, and maybe those types of people were the only, that 40 units was the time they got an art history class, and it planted something inside of them to make them a more holistic leader when they're the rocket scientists. Some just got infatuated, they were definitely pulled into, something maybe not so academically rigorous, and then stayed there or didn't do anything else. And I think that article really struck me. And I was just curious, like when you and I were going through, what were some of the things that you had seen through that article?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the things that really struck me is how many leaders and hiring managers, like in the 90% range, are just as impressed with somebody who has well micro-credentialed themselves as a 4-year degree. And so part of what that says to me is somebody who is ambitious, who knows what they want to do, who wants to get themselves tooled up, and maybe for financial reasons, can't afford a 4-year degree, doesn't want to wait that long, or just isn't interested. I mean, an academic setting isn't for everybody. And I don't say that as it's a downside. I mean, we all have things that we're really good at. And we all, and excel when the fit is right. So that's always part of my career, coaching is let's figure out what you need and what's going to be fulfilling for you. And I'm not going to say there's no right answer because that's just kind of whiffing on the question, right? I think that there's what I liked about that article was pointing out the realities, the practicalities. I think it would be great for those 40 credits for people to have the option to work, to learn a very specific skill. I'm all about practical. I actually remember my last term, I needed, I think, 2 more credits. So I worked for a professor and I told a tax professor, which was, my earlier legal career. And I said, I just want to do something practical. Can I do something that's for a client? Like I was looking for client work because I just didn't want it to feel useless, And I think that there are a lot of people who probably have similar feelings about their education. There's so many ways that you can have exposure to things like art history or different language or travel. And I know a lot of people who, they're traveling to Japan right now. And maybe, they got the spark, not just from their Japanese restaurant, but from a class or something like that. You don't know that, but kind of where I come out on that is in part informed by the fact that I know so many people, lawyers and non-lawyers, who feel crushed by their student debt and don't feel like they can take the job that they want to take because they need to take that high-paying job because they've got a lot of debt. Over $200,000 worth of debt. And the only way that they can pay that is to take these high-paying jobs, and then you end up with like a lot of people that are stressed out, unhappy, all of those kinds of things. So I think there should be more practicality because I also want to see people be really excited about their work. That's part of creating a fulfilling life and career is, I love my work. Let me figure out what I want to do. So even trying out different micro-credentialing, oh, you know what? Hey, that accounting, that was not for me. I think in general, since I went to college, classes in that area are a lot more practical. I think of law school now has so many more practical classes that are clinics that people actually get to try out their skills. I took a negotiation class. I learned a lot from that. Like, I will never play with my ponytail in any meeting because it was videoed and then showed to, my 40 classmates. I will tell you, it was mortifying. But experiences like that make you grow. And I think and again, like practical. And then, this latest, about student debt being, forgiven. And regardless of where you come out on that, you have to acknowledge that you have to ask yourself, is that student debt worth it? Or is it worth it for families to spend those kind of resources on something that may not actually help their adult child get a good job or go in a direction that they want to go? So there's a lot of questions out there. I think where I come out of it is you have to be really thoughtful about what you expect to get out of it.
Yeah, one of my sons is getting ready to get an MBA. He went to Indiana University. He's been out for 5 years at E&Y now for the last 5 years, and he is hardcore. And it's refreshing because if you follow this industry, it is questionable. Like, people are questioning now, do I take on even more debt and get an MBA? Law school, you're really making a vocational call, but MBA, a lot of times is just trying to put you at a different strata to be able to do something a lot different than what you did when you went in there. But I think that decision too, that financial decision and that credentialing, I think starts to come into, part of doing the meritocracy is I remember being in aerospace and, I worked in there and I started being on a very fast track, and I started realizing, you had to, at a minimum, it always said minimum required credential bachelor's degree. And I was like, okay, check that. And then, started my MBA when I was in Boeing. But I remember to kind of go to the executive level, they were like preferred an MBA or a master's degree. And I remember competing against people where I was in Southern California. It was table stakes. Like, you had to have a master's at that point to get to the level. I remember growing up kind of blue collar, dad's a union guy. I'm like, I need to go to I want to get that credential of a top 20 MBA school because, maybe for me psychologically, that gave me the confidence to go to the next level. And but I did go, I definitely went into debt and did that. And so it was something, like you said, you got to be able to kind of pay it off in the end. But let me ask you this. Another one of the articles that we looked at was Forbes. They had an article that really kind of talked about an explanation of micro-credentialing. And they gave stats on how it's actually exploding and taking off. And, I thought the one part about this that it kind of is consistent with the example that I brought in, which was that micro-credentialing leads to badges, and the badges have kind of start to get a life. I've explained just the life that one had, but what are you seeing like in the industry on these kind of micro-credentialing that actually is giving a valuable badge, and it's a badge that's recognized and in some ways verified?
Yeah. I mean, I think Credly, I think where the badges, which is one of the places you can go to get your badge. And I have a bunch of badges. You're actually making me think that, geez, I don't think I have them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because of all the assessment tools that I use. I get a badge, I get a credential on that. So it's pretty similar. I think that, I think this is in many ways probably going a little bit the way of executive coaching. So the International Coach Federation, has credentialing programs. So I guess that's another micro-credential, right? For the associate certified coach and the professional certified coach and then master certified coach. And there's requirements within all those. I don't think it'll get that detailed, but I think the point is people want to know, one is like, all right, I'm hiring this coach. Is this just someone who, hung out a shingle, but, they haven't done much, they haven't done much of anything. They're coaching because they can't get a job or something like that. But I think that, Credly, I don't recall what all the requirements are from that, but I think that it's really valuable. I think because that you actually took the coursework. I mean, it then goes into the question of how valuable was the coursework. But getting, as the article pointed out, getting a micro-credential from a university, where it's been like Georgetown has a number of micro-credentials, which I've looked at with clients who wanted to shift fields, people who, not all lawyers, I keep talking about how lawyers want to leave the law, but it is because that's part of the work they do. Hey, they put in, 15 or 20 years and it's time to do something else. And they want to they have a lot of experience, they're taken seriously as a professional, but they want to be able to say, hey, I also have this like in human resources or in privacy, or I'm really up to date on, what's going on in a specific field or type of service. So I really do think it's a great thing. I think that Credly and the badges are really important.
Yeah. Probably one of the last topics I wanted to talk a little bit about is everything can be taken to an excess, right? People get hooked in social media and they're just constantly checking it. People get hooked into the micro-credentialing, something that I'm starting to see at the executive level, not just within the company I'm in, but I have a lot of friends, I've talked to a lot of people, is kind of two levels of extreme. One is companies levying these credentials on where it's not really an elective process. It's like, you work at a company that's got a partnership with a certain company. That company wants to show allegiance to that. So they want to be able to say, we've got so many people certified to be doing stuff with that company.
Six Sigma or something.
Yeah. Six Sigma would be a great example. And the employee isn't really fully on board, but then when that company's going to market and they want to say, hey, look, everybody's got Six Sigma qualifications, or we have 350 people within the federal sector that can do Six Sigma, if that was the example we're using. Impressive in the selling process for the company, and it's probably very important to show that credential when you're competing for, especially in the federal government, large contracts that are IDIQ or BPA, or contracts that basically give you the right. It's like a hunting license. You need to get on that contract vehicle, and to do that, you need to show you're substantial and significant. And usually to do that, you got to show you have resources and people that can do stuff. And I see it across industry where, and how I find it when I look at it, and I'm gonna claim it on myself too, is like I have a qualification for AWS. Like I'm qualified. I'm certified to do this. I'm not sure you'd want to use me, but I could help.
At least you're honest, right?
Well, I could certify and go through an assessment for AWS and help you move to the cloud. I know how it's priced. I went through the process to see the different types of products that would be put together with Amazon and IBM. I love Amazon. And this has nothing to do with them, but I did that out of my own free will because IBM isn't that way. But I wanted to make sure, I wanted to show as a leader, as an executive, that I'm super supportive of that relationship because it comes back in a lot of different ways. But I will probably never get asked. And if I did, my leadership would not let me verify like stuff like that because technically, we have people that really know how to do that. that was a pretty, I won't say rigorous. Rigorous is 2 years of an MBA program, but it was definitely something that you had to do. And I see those. So when I see in people's LinkedIn profile, and I'll see like their person A, but they've got these credentials over here that are way not related. It's like either that they're. Sometimes it throws me off, like maybe they're just not focused and it's a negative, or sometimes I look at the company they're at and like, maybe they just need to do that. So it's almost like this indirect
or they're
projection.
super curious. So I hear this complaint from people like the flavor of the month. Oh, now we have to get this credential. Now we have to get this credential. So, to your point, is the credential actually of value? And to your point about like, you would never want anybody to hire you for anything that had anything to do with AWS, like you personally to do the work.
Especially if it wasn't supply chain.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sizing your infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's like a little bit of realism about, can you actually deliver? Like, what are you getting out of the course? Are you getting just a foundation that then you need to apply? I mean, that's actually something that I've experienced in all my micro-credentialed programs is like with the assessment tools, hey, we're going to give you 10 of these because we want you to use it right now. So you figure it out, When
you ask, though, like, what do you get? I didn't really think about it like that, Ann. So, as the executive, we might be putting together a $100 million bid, and there is an infrastructure part of it. It's not my level or area of expertise, but I now know enough to know what questions to ask.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't have known that. I would have just turned it over to somebody. But then at the end, if the project failed, my leadership would come and say, Troy, either you should have had the right person or you should, that's why we have these types of credentials. I guess, I could see the benefit there.
Right. And I think, and actually it's similar to, my experience as a tax lawyer. So I've worked in a number of different industries. I've worked on a number of different tax issues. It's been a really long time. But at the same time, going to law school gave me a perspective and a way of approaching problems that now I'm a really good issue spotter for my clients. So I always joke around like the only law practice that I ever do is to get somebody to the right person. That sounds like something you need to hire an employment lawyer for. That sounds like, it's time for you to talk to, your corporate lawyer, or that you may have an opportunity here, So I think that as an executive, having the ability to understand broadly enough that you can issue spot and identify opportunities and threats before they, so you can take advantage of them or before they derail you is important.
Dan, probably one other area I was going to explore with you. So I do a lot of work with veterans, trying to help them through veterans transitions. And at USC, they have a Master's of Business for veterans. And I've talked about a lot on the show. Something that I noticed is a lot of the veterans, when they get this master's degree from USC, they are trying to credential up and make that transition. I've talked a lot about the struggles that a lot of these great leaders have in translating their skills to corporate skills. And probably more, it's not them, more the corporations have a problem translating it to be able to place them in the right area or even get them past the filter criteria on the front end. That's something I'm very passionate in trying to work on. The thing, though, that I also notice is that a lot of the veterans, when they're getting out, this is their time, and they're older folks. They've done 20, 30 years in. Now they have this opportunity to get their master's degree as a complement to really rebrand themselves. And in the meantime, they continue to stack credentials in like almost to a point. It's like I respectfully, like I really appreciate like. Is it curiosity? That might be one thing, but really they're at a transition. They really need to be careful on not over-branding themselves or looking too diverse. And I was just curious, anything, do you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's a little bit similar to a couple conversations I've had recently when I look at somebody's resume, if they've moved every couple of years, it might be a perfectly legitimate thing. So for one example, actually two examples, both lawyers, they're deal lawyers, And so they worked internally until their companies were acquired. And guess what? When their companies were acquired, they were redundant. And so they had to move on. But not everybody appreciates that. So there's a reason for that sort of scattered look. Like it's a little bit of like, all right, do you have a focus? Like why? And by the way, it's okay to take the courses, right? But maybe you don't put that on. You have to be thoughtful about creating your resume. Your resume has to tell a story about who you are and what the value is that you can contribute and what your focus is. People want to hire people that are going to stay around. I mean, retention is just a huge issue. And just taking a step back to, an earlier part of our discussion, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, this idea of like the excess. That's really what you're talking about. Like where are you spending all your time and why are you doing this? And thinking about it with respect to college, I didn't take a lot of like fun electives because I got my bachelor's and master's in a total of 4 years.
Wow.
So, my BA in economics and then my master's in public policy. And then I went straight through to law school. So I spent 7 years in Ann Arbor, go blue.
I thought we had a deal after the USC loss that we weren't going to be bringing this up, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I couldn't help it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you and a bunch of other people.
Listen, I've watched so much bad Michigan football over, a lot of years from the time I was like 3 or 4 years old that, I get to claim one or two victories there.
Okay. Yeah.
But the point, so like if you look at a resume like mine, which is ironic because I ended up doing something totally different, my resume, my education looks really focused, economics, master's in public policy, law degree. My classes were all very business focused. I really regret never taking a course called Blood Feuds, which was about Icelandic blood feuds in law school, just because it sounded interesting. So I think, I think in terms of, I think the message ought to be, do what interests you. Like, that's actually really cool. I've taught myself enough vacation, French and Italian to have a good vacation and be able to order off a menu. But think about the message that your LinkedIn profile is telling, and what is your resume saying. That would be my advice there.
Okay.
And you ought to be adjusting your resume, and again, because especially if you've had a professional life of 30 years, 20 or 30 years, you have a lot that you could say about yourself, especially if it's really been a journey and a lot of opportunities. So sometimes I work with clients who are consultants, for example, and it's like, all right, that's a 5-page resume. And you have to bucket it for people. Like here's where you did health policy. Here's where you were doing digital work. Here's where, so that people can synthesize it, get a picture of you, and your skill set and how they can use you and whether this is the right opportunity for you. So I say do as much as you want, but be thoughtful about, be really thoughtful about what you want. So you're finding a good fit for yourself. Build that up on your resume with, appropriate credentialing experiences. I mean, before I started coaching, I did so much reading. I was so happy to read something that wasn't about, internal revenue code. But I mean, I'd read like a book a day, and there's so much great work out there, leadership work, management work, communication, that you can educate yourself, really quite well. And then you've got to package it.
So on the executive coaching part where you, like you said, you read somebody's resume, it tells you a lot. Sometimes I have friends that bring me their resume and say, hey, Troy, why don't you take a look? What do you think? And first of all, I either know where they're heading or I ask them. And if they'll say, hey, look, I'm really trying to work my way to a senior executive position, potentially board member, and I'll see a lot of tech, programming, different types of more detailed, and so it sends a signal to me that they really maybe should be questioning whether they want to go up for the right reason or whether their passion is really in the technical, into the development, and they always in tech industry especially, or in consulting specifically. I see two types of people that kind of work their way up. Functional people that, started maybe in industry as an AP analyst and worked their way to an AP manager, then an accounting person, then the senior manager for, financial accounting, and then maybe up and eventually to a CFO. And they're blacking out the bingo card all the way up to kind of get that profile. And then on the tech side, in which I see a lot within IBM, is people that are unbelievable engineers. They went, and then they're developers. And then from developers, they led dev teams. And then from the dev team, they were CTO. But when you get to a certain point, it's, I think the credentials are almost like pieces of breadcrumbs that are kind of left behind, and it kind of tells you a little bit more that intrinsically that you wouldn't really think of. And so, like if you're trying to project, you're an executive big picture person, so, the old genre. Sometimes I think that can work against you, and it solidifies the concrete around you and makes you a little bit more, keeps you into your strata that maybe you won't be. I don't know if you see that.
I do. I mean, I look at a lot of resumes, and so, and actually your point about raising the level of it. In other words, like not being so detailed. I mean, again, I looked at one yesterday, and it was like you're just getting way too deep. You're getting in the weeds. You're talking about yourself as a strategic lawyer. And this is just too many bullet points, and please make the font type a little bigger, because my old eyes are having a hard time with it. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect, but also going back to why programs like our Leadership Academy are so valuable is that what you're missing there when you're talking about someone who's tech is that they haven't invested in the people side, the quote unquote softer side, which is actually probably the harder side. They need to know themselves, understand what their strengths and their weaknesses are in relation to others. Like, can they be decisive? Can they give feedback? Can they manage their upset and their shadow side that we've talked about a lot when they're under stress, and can they lead a team? You can't be an executive and not be able to lead a team. So going through something like our Leadership Academy, I mean, and we offer badges too. So, so we're right in there in the mix there, but that's something I would be looking for. And even if it hasn't been, kind of an investment or a focus over the last 15 years, what have you done over the last 5 years? Have you seen yourself as a leader and tried to improve those skills? There's a book that I read recently that was so great. It's called Thanks for the Feedback, the Science and Art of Receiving Feedback. And it's the rest of this is to me is so funny, even when it's off base and wrong and you frankly aren't in the mood. But one of the little vignettes that the authors, by the way, it comes out of the Harvard Business Project, Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone, is about, the story that gets started about, oh, this person, they're always getting so many opportunities and they're a favorite and they're this. But then if you kind of peel back the curtain and you see what they're doing, they're seeking out feedback and they're trying to figure out how to be better, and they're keeping their eye on where do they want to be and how do they develop that skill set and be known and recognized for that.
Wow.
So when I coach like mid-career people, it's about positioning. That's the positioning I'm really trying to help them with, is creating that, because you want the narrative of, well, yeah, I'm looking at your resume, and of course, it's like the natural next step is that you should be promoted. Like you're the best person on this team to get this opportunity. Yeah,
and I think that's, like you said, the reflection and trying to kind of help somebody. I know for me, the executive coaching part of it was really kind of a second opinion. It's like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Am I there? And I know I'm not an executive coach, but I think what I try to help either the people that work for me or people that come to me that look to me as somebody that would be, introspective and be able to help them. I don't have the tools of it, but I definitely want them to process it correctly too, and not, especially with the investment and, promotion cycles out there, they could be looking at, hey, it's now or never, or maybe I need to make a move. Usually the people that when they come to me, they're like on the verge of doing something. And, that's a little bit of, you want to be able to make sure you don't like push them off the edge too. It's got to be their choice, right? I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I think, the other thing about coaching is that, like as a coach, I have no agenda other than
I want you to get what you want, and I want you to be able to understand what it is you want and what will help, what is a good fit for you. What's the next step for you that you're choosing that is going to be the best next step given all the priorities in your life?
Right. Well, and I am grateful for you coming by, and I'm glad that we were able to kind of go through this. I've, like I said, your executive workshops that you've been having in the Leadership Academy, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting together. I know you're getting ready to do a family celebration this evening, so I just wanted to tell you thank you for stopping by today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always great to see you, Troy.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.